Hi everyone, today's my presentation is called Is there a feedback loop of populist party voting and dissatisfaction with democracy? And it's a panel study on two concurrent elections in Germany. Actually, this paper is a part of my dissertation project, and from my dissertation project, my research puzzle is that why could AfD break into national party system? In fact, in the past few years, there's a lot of research about AfD, but my perspective is slightly different. I noticed that after broke into European Parliament and 13 subnational parliaments in the 2013 to 2017 election cycle, and it makes me wonder whether concatenated elections help AfD to break into the national party system. The core argument is that previous election can shape vote choice in subsequent election within a multi-level electoral system. And this paper focuses on two concatenated elections, namely the 2013 national election and 2014 European Parliament election, which took place before the refugee crisis. To situate this paper into an intellectual debate, the intellectual debate I would like to discuss is the winner-loser gap literature. Actually, the starting point of the winner-loser gap literature is the very small, a very small book that you can see in this slide as the loser's consent, edited by Christopher Anderson and his colleagues. The key idea of winner-loser gap is that in the post-election period, the level of democratic satisfaction between electoral winners and losers diverges. And that's winner-loser gap. Of course, it's mediated by electoral system. For example, in US, you can imagine nowadays Biden's supporters' democratic satisfaction would be higher than Trump's voters. But then in multi-party system, the landscape would be rather different. And that's why scholars have tried to discuss in recent years the multi-dimensional nature of winner and loser. And actually, there are four major kinds of operationalization nowadays. How to classify winner and loser. The first is the most traditional one. That is, once my chosen party is governing party, then I will be regarded as winner. But then, if I choose a opposition party, then I will be regarded as loser. But then subsequently, Sink in 2012 argues that if a very small party or a new party enters parliament, it's possible that its voters would regard themselves as winner. But basically, the first two operationalization is based on the chosen party. Subsequently, some scholars argue that even though objectively my chosen party is an opposition voter, then I will be regarded as loser objectively. But then if my ideological position or policy position is close to the governing coalition or governing party, it is possible that my democratic dissatisfaction will be reduced in comparison to those voters whose ideological position or policy position is far away from the governing parties. That's the third operationalization. And the fourth operationalization is what we call psychological part, which is tapping into respondents' directly tapping into their perception, asking them whether they think themselves is winner or loser after the election. There are three interlinked open questions in the current literature of winner-loser gap. The first is that from previous slide, we know that our losing parties can be heterogeneous. So linking to the literature of populism, my question is democratic satisfaction similar amongst populist opposition party voters and non-populist opposition party voters? That's the first question. The second question is certainly linked to the first. In the winner-loser gap literature, the dependent variables are usually nationally based. But then we know that populist party voters are usually very Eurosceptic. So will there be any spillover effect of democratic satisfaction at the EU level? The third part is about the behavioral effect. That is, the winner-loser gap literature always treat democratic satisfaction as dependent variable. And here comes the feedback loop. That is, will democratic satisfaction affect voting behavior in subsequent election. And here's the summary of 3 hypotheses. First of all, we can look at the upper hand, the heterogeneous loser hypothesis. When one vote for populist party in national election, their satisfaction should be lower than that of non-populist party voters. On the bottom, in the bottom is the spillover hypothesis. There's when voters vote for populist party in national election, their satisfaction at EU arena would also be lower than that of non-populist party voters. And the right-hand side of this picture is the feedback loop hypothesis. That is, the democratic satisfaction at national arena and EU arena should affect their voting behavior in subsequent European Parliament election. And to test these hypotheses, I leveraged the case of Germany. And to recap a bit about this political landscape in 2013-2014, Grand Coalition was formed after the 2013 federal election. But then there were just 4 parties represented in parliament, namely CSU, SPD, CDU, CSU, SPD, the Left Party, and the Green. And there was a lot of representational deficit at the time because there's 15% of the votes were wasted, mainly because of the FDP and AfD. And so in this landscape, there were parliamentary opposition parties, namely the Left Party versus the Green. That is, we have populist radical left and mainstream left on the one hand, and on the other hand, there were also unrepresented opposition parties, namely populist right and mainstream right. And the data I used to analyze is the 2013 to 2014 Making Electoral Democracy Work panel data in Bavaria. And as you can see in this picture, that's the data structure of this panel. And I use list-wise deletion when a variable is missing in the estimation. And to deal with panel attrition, I use post-stratification demographic weight as well. And in stage 1, as you will see in the coming slides, I analyze how the vote choice in 2013 federal election affects democratic satisfaction in subsequent wave. And the second stage is the voting behavior. That is, how does the satisfaction with democracy at national and EU arena affects vote choice in the supranational election. And here's the first stage empirical strategy. I use lag-dependent variable model to estimate it. The dependent variable is democratic satisfaction at national arena and also EU arena. And also I include the party. That is to test how different parties differ in terms of their democratic satisfaction, and also other parameters like ideological congruence between Grand Coalition and the respondent, and their winner-loser perception. And also I add other controls in this model. So in terms of result, first of all, we can see that CSU voters has the highest satisfaction, and then followed by SPD voters. But then the democratic satisfaction of these 2 governing parties' voters is actually not statistically distinguishable from that of Green Party voters and FDP voters. Now, talking about the heterogeneity among voters of losing parties, what we can see is that the Left Party voters are actually less satisfied with how democracy works at national arena than Green voters, which provides support for the heterogeneity loser hypothesis. Also, looking at the non-parliamentary opposition parties, comparing AfD and FDP, we can see that AfD voters' democratic satisfaction at national arena is also lower than that of FDP voters. Then moving on to the second hypothesis, that is the spillover effect. We focus on the democratic satisfaction at European Union arena. First of all, we notice that Green voters has the highest satisfaction, but then compared to CSU, SPD, and FDP voters, their differences are not statistically significant. Then we compare the difference between Green voters and Left Party voters. We can see that spillover effect exists because the Left Party voters are significantly less satisfied with how democracy works at European arena than Green Party voters. Also compared when we compare FDP and AfD, we see that AfD voters' democratic satisfaction at EU arena is lower than that of FDP voters. What's more interesting is the last result, that is comparing Left Party and AfD. We see that AfD voters are less satisfied with how democracy works at European Union arena than Left Party voters. Part of this difference can be explained by the fact that Left Party has been much more ambivalent in terms of their Eurosceptic stance, whereas AfD was clearly Eurosceptic after the Euro crisis. And so this explains why the difference can emerge between the two populist parties. And talking about the second stage analysis, the focus is how does democratic satisfaction affect vote choice in European Parliament election. And I run a very simple multinomial logic model, and the dependent variable is categorical, and that's why I use multinomial logic. The dependent variable is the vote choice in European Parliament election. I also include abstain in it. And talking about the parameter to estimate this model, I include the democratic satisfaction at both national arena and European Union arena. And I also include the left-right ideological self-placement of the respondent and other control variables. And so here's the result. The key parameter here is the democratic satisfaction at national arena. What we see is that high level of democratic satisfaction increases the probability of choosing CSU and SPD. On the other hand, when respondent has lower level of democratic satisfaction at national arena, then they are more likely to vote for AfD. And for other vote choice options, including abstain, the democratic satisfaction has no effect. Then we change the parameter to democratic satisfaction at European Union arena. Actually, it's very similar. That is, higher democratic satisfaction at EU arena increase the probability to choose the two main parties at that time, whereas lower level of democratic satisfaction increases the probability of choosing AfD. So to summarize the finding, first of all, heterogeneity loser, we see that satisfaction with democracy at national arena differs between populist opposition party voters and non-populist opposition party voters. Also, the second hypothesis, spillover effect. If voters choose a Eurosceptic populist party in national election, their satisfaction with democracy at EU arena should be lower than that of non-populist party voters. Lastly, another important finding is that democratic satisfaction, no matter at national or EU arena, would affect vote choice. That is, as mentioned in the previous slide, we see that when voters democratic satisfaction at national and EU arena is lower, they are more likely to vote for a populist right-wing party in subsequent European Parliament election. The contribution are as follows. First, I try to connect the winner-lose gap literature with the populist party studies. That's the first important contribution. And the second contribution is that I try to identify there's actually a feedback loop of populist party voting. And lastly, I would like to acknowledge that this research is funded by DAD research grant. And if you have any other questions, I'm very happy to discuss it. And if you have further questions, here's my contact. Thank you very much for your attention.